Actually, I do have one thing. Yeah.
Do you need more?
No,
All right.
go ahead. That's fine.
Okay, 3,
2.
2, 1.
And
Did you see any of that stuff we talked about last week from David Foster Wallace?
no, I did not. I did not get a chance to look at that. It's still in one of my open browser sessions.
I was listening to one of his commencement speeches. I don't know what university he did it for. It's not as. It's well done. You'll enjoy it.
All right, I will definitely.
It
check
talks
that out.
it talks about postmodernism, and this is well before Jordan Peterson was talking about it, or at least publicly.
Right. You got to finish that Peterson book. We could probably do a whole hour on that.
I have it. I just haven't read it yet.
Takes a little time. Get started on
It's
it.
a digestible type of thing.
Yeah, it takes a little time.
Like go slow. Get your highlighter out.
Yeah, you might want to do that.
Yeah.
At least.
No, it's a learning book. It's not a fiction.
Absolutely. So we're going to be talking today a little bit about you,
Oh, wonderful.
Mr. Van Staten,
Spectacular.
and your achievements, things you've been doing over the last few years. We worked together many years ago.
What years was that?
That would have been, I think it would have been around 2009, maybe 2010.
Earlier than
You think? But
that. 05.
well, I didn't start over at that place until 06.
So 06 to 8, maybe.
Yeah, it was sometime in that range.
6 to
Yeah.
8. And you were on one side, I was on the other.
Yeah. So we did quite a few large projects there. We did some interesting stuff. Got some sizable things taken care of, and then you kind of moseyed on, and I moseyed on in my own direction, and we hadn't talked in quite a while.
Yeah, my portfolio there was enormous.
How many years were you there?
5.
5 years.
5
okay.
years at for those who are listening, a healthcare system. So I had a couple hundred, if not more, applications to deal with, clinical and non-clinical,
Right.
both sides.
And then that, I think the project we worked on was around the philanthropic area.
That was a company called Blackbaud,
Correct. Yep.
and we were implementing a philanthropy system for a healthcare system.
Where they had none before.
They had, they were archaic processes. They didn't have actually a software system to do it, to manage all that. So
Right.
Blackbaud was the system that was put in over there.
Right. And then you ended up taking over a large portfolio of the clinical, non-clinical apps and all that good stuff.
I took over the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, all the clinical applications were things that actually run the hospital. So on the software end of it, and on the hardware end, but we dealt with infrastructure and operations.
Right.
More on your end.
Yeah. We did most of the
And
infrastructure
networking and
and
all that kind of stuff.
yeah, all the fun hands-on stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was the clinical components, which were everything that runs in the hospital, essentially intensive care, NICU units, so on and so forth, radiology. And the non-clinical, which is the business systems, were essentially the ERP, human resources, electronic medical records, so on and so forth.
Right. And they had a custom one there that they had worked for many years.
Yeah.
And that one actually had started from a DOD grant that they had received. It was kind of an interesting background on that.
Yeah.
They ended up kind of changing horses after right around the time I left, I think, and that was around 2013.
That was
2012.
I was actually part of the voting on whether to replace all the clinical systems with Epic, which is
The standard de facto.
the system that was going to consolidate essentially all those clinical systems, and there were dozens and dozens of them. That portfolio is pretty large, so managing all of those contracts and projects concurrently was certainly challenging.
It was very challenging. Yeah, it was a challenging environment. A lot of changes going on. A lot of
That was also when affordable care was coming in, starting to be talked about, and HIPAA was always still an issue. ICD-10 was coming into play.
yeah. There was a lot of heavy lifting in that area.
Yeah, so there was the healthcare community is just constantly changing, right? So I didn't have a lack of things to do, that's for sure.
Right.
So the modernization, and there were ancillary systems that people didn't even know about. I'll give you an example on the smaller systems, like on the business application side. Besides the call centers, I used to run those as well. But I'll give you an example of like a really small system. When people come into a hospital and they have to drop off their belongings, for example,
Right.
that all has to be tracked. Inventory control. And they were using a spreadsheet to do it.
No way.
So we're replacing that system. And there were dozens of systems in there that I'm not even sure that the health network knew existed at all.
We were finding new systems all the time because we did the beginnings of a PCI DSS audit, compliance audit, and we ended up, we were finding all kinds of stuff all over the place, and it's amazing how many organizations don't know how many, especially a large organization, they don't have a picture of their portfolio.
Well, one of the first things I did when I went over there is I took inventory not only of the people but all the software that we had.
Right.
And I'd find systems that had been in place for 12 to 18 years that didn't even need to be there.
Oh yeah.
At all. They were not being used, but we're still being charged maintenance and support for them. Right. So, it wasn't just about my job there was not just about the technology. It was about a much more holistic approach about statements of work, contract obligations, writing contracts, writing RFPs, dealing with vendors all the time.
Right.
Who want to either sell product or services. I had to deal with pretty much everything, cradle to grave. So.
And when you're dealing with a
plus I had, arguably probably about 40 projects going on all at the same time.
right, I think when I was done there, I think I had racked up somewhere above 60 projects I did in about 8 years.
Yeah,
while I was there.
That was a ton.
What was your most in that portfolio? What was your most challenging project that you did?
I want to say the call center was definitely outdated. It wasn't a full communications channel call center. It hadn't been modernized in quite some time. I think we actually used Siemens back end by default.
Right.
Not by choice, but by default, by contract. We're using a Siemens back end infrastructure on the telephony side, and then, but they weren't organized. They had no computer telephony integration, no CTI, no interactive voice response systems. They were really starting from the ground up. I don't want to say it was necessarily challenging. I knew what they needed, and I knew what they needed to do. It just educating the directorship at the time of that area on what they should be doing in a consultancy capacity, and then going through all of the procurement processes and proof of concepts and building out a pod module type format.
You're basically taking them from the dark ages up into, modern technology at that point.
Yeah, well, and the part is that you're not just doing the technology, you're doing the business end of it as well. So all the processes had to be changed, and the people had to be changed. They didn't have any monitoring systems in place, so we had to put those into place as well, which were witness systems.
Yeah,
at the time.
Not familiar with that one, but
Well, they essentially they can you can listen into at the time. That you could listen into any call at any time. You could record. You could do screen capture. You could record screen, so on and so forth. For the purposes of training. When you call somewhere and they said
this may be recorded. Exactly. There you go.
Well,
we didn't even have that when we started, right?
Well, no.
It didn't
So
exist.
there was basically a couple companies that were players back then. One was called Witness Systems, which still exists, and NICE Systems, NICE.
I think I've heard of that one, yeah.
That did all that. Now, both of those have expanded their portfolios quite significantly, well beyond just those. I think NICE was actually purchased by somebody else, but so it was. I don't know if that was challenging so much as time consuming, because it was more about education. If I could have just gone in there and just done it, it would have been the outcome would have been the same. But
right.
Educating the health system on how to go about doing that was
and getting people to change their ways.
In and of itself is a thought. Organizational change was difficult during that one.
And I think accountability falls into that too, because that with the change becomes a new hierarchy of reporting to and all that.
Sure. Well, in organizational change management, I mean, believe it or not, it wasn't that long ago. So let's say 10 years ago, was not even a term really on people's radar.
No, it wasn't.
Understanding that they should be doing that alongside, concurrently, or in front of actually doing any implementations of software. Everybody's just interested in getting new software but not telling you how to use it. So I was doing it, but we weren't necessarily calling it that. So,
right.
So that was interesting. I think the other I'll never forget. We had a lot of clinical systems that were critical, if you will, and some of those were in the NICU units.
Yeah, I think there was actually an effort to replace to standardize across all the sites using the same NICU system.
Yeah.
And then I was actually part of that. I think in the initial evaluation phase, we ended up checking out some different systems, and that was huge. I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, when you're sitting there and you see a kid that's, 16 weeks premature sitting in an incubator, it's a big deal.
No, that's when it becomes real.
Yeah.
I think it was important for me that this hospital had about seven major hospitals plus ambulatory sites and I think 10. I want to say about 10,000 physicians in its network.
Yeah.
And I would make sure that I visited those sites regularly, not just stayed at the downtown technology location, because it becomes real when you go out there.
Right.
And I did visit the NICU units and the ICU units, and you realize, I always used to kind of preach to my employees, we have to understand what we're really doing and who we're affecting and why it's important. I would say basically we don't build systems, for a living. We build things that help people have better outcomes, particularly in that environment.
Right.
But it doesn't matter what environment it is. Whatever system you're building, you're always building it for for an outcome. Let's say, for example, in your side, if you're thickening up the pipes or the network or the cloud or whatever it may be, right? This is an end reason for it, right? So I'd always take my employees out there and see the ICU units and say, look, forget about whether we're using Java or .NET, right?
Right.
For just a minute, and realize that what you're doing and the applications that we build and the importance of those applications is affects the way that this gentleman or this woman will, their quality of care.
Right.
So take it seriously. I do recall one of the most challenging evenings was when I got a phone call from a company. I got a phone call from the NICU unit at one of the hospitals, and they said that all the systems were down.
Never a good call.
Not a good call to get. I only got that call once. I mean, I got all kinds of emergency calls, but that was certainly one that took me, that goes straight to your heart, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, Sunday morning, whatever. I said the systems at XYZ hospital are down in the NICU unit. And of course, all you're thinking in your head is these babies not breathing and all this kind of stuff.
They're not getting stats on them.
So, of course, my first question is, why? Why is it not up?
That's why we're calling you.
Well, I mean, it had been escalated to me.
Right.
And I asked, how long has it been? And it came to me pretty quickly, within about 5 minutes. And it turned out, and I can't name the name of the company for liability purposes, but essentially they had shut the systems off.
And why did they do that?
They didn't do that because the health system hadn't paid its maintenance and support agreement, which is about, I want to say about $2 or $3 million for the year.
$2 or $3 million.
So they shut the system off.
Dear God, man. Were they in negotiations to work through that?
At that time, I was unaware of any such negotiations taking place.
Or even that there was even a problem with it?
No. So far as I was concerned, I mean, that series of systems was on my radar, but it's not as though it was out of maintenance and support. So it was a financial matter. They had sent the bill, and the bill hadn't gotten paid. Well, I didn't run the finance division.
No,
so
no, right. You wouldn't even be visible.
I may have approved it being signed off on, but that doesn't mean they sent the check. Nonetheless, they shut the system down.
Dear God, man.
So I got on the phone with with that company, obviously, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And they're actually the ones that told me that that's why it was off. That the people at the health system didn't know why. So I said, I'll figure out why. I called my contacts who were pretty high up, and I said, listen, the system's not on. I said, let's look into it for a second. It comes back within a minute. Oh, yeah, you didn't pay your maintenance and support. That was it.
Wow.
It's 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday.
It pays to talk to people.
Well, I told him, I said, listen, if that system's not up in like 2 minutes, you're going to, this is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard of. You're shutting down a NICU unit.
How many lawyers did our health system have at that time? What about, an office of about 20 or 30 of them?
Yeah,
We're going to put 20 or 30 lawyers on you.
No, I just told him, I said that thing's on in like 2 minutes, right? Or you're going to have a real problem on your hands. Right?
That's real.
Come Monday morning. That was real.
That's real.
And what I meant by that is that, not like I'm not a legalese guy. I mean, I don't like to sue people, and I don't like I'm not personally like that, and I don't like to deal in business that way.
No.
Through contracts. But, that was a liability that they were willing to take on. Then I said, I just gave it to them straight. I said, turn on in 2 minutes or you're in a lot of trouble come Monday.
Absolutely.
It was back up in 2 minutes.
Well, could you imagine, the cascading lawsuits that would come down after that?
Some of these large organizations, they make such silly bureaucratic decision making. It didn't just happen there. I've dealt with it for years and years and years.
Yeah, I think that's a common struggle in businesses and especially in IT. It gets bogged down by the bureaucracy. IT's there to try to streamline things, try to make things work better.
Solve a problem.
Right.
I actually saw a company over the last couple of years sue for $4 million. Sue another organization for $4 million. They lost about $1 billion plus in business just for doing it, for suing them.
Oh my God. Yeah, there's
No,
repercussions.
and I think I can tell you. I remember talking with the account executives of that other organization. Said, I understand why you guys are still drop the $4 million issue. You're going to lose more money by not getting any business with this company. And they said, no, our lawyers are sticking to it. In short, and to answer your question, that was one that kind of stuck out of my mind. But
What was the funnest?
driving a cab when I was 18 years old.
Really, you drove a cab.
Yeah,
Where at?
Phoenix, Arizona.
No, that might be all right. As long as your air conditioner's working, you're going to be all right.
No, you don't understand. A friend of mine, I was probably about 19. I was doing odd jobs, blue collar jobs, and he was an Iraqi guy from Michigan, in fact. His family was into buy the convenience stores and all this kind of stuff. So he had a couple 3 cabs that he owned, yellow cab, and I guess his brother got sick one night and said, "You want to fill in for the night? We need to get the car on the road." And I said, "Sure, why not? How hard can it be?
How hard could it be?
How hard can it be? Drive people around, take them to the airport." That is not what it turned out to
It'll be fun.
That is not what it turned out to
What
be.
did it turn into? Like the movie that.
So I ended up doing it for about 6 to 9 months. I can't recall. It was probably about 9 months. It wasn't like it wasn't Taxi Cab Confessions. It wasn't Uber. That's for sure.
Yeah, this is before Uber and Lyft and
Yeah,
all that
right
even
before
existed,
that.
right? This is hardcore yellow taxi cab.
I would say 99.9% of the people that got in were up to no good in some capacity. I think I picked of the hundreds, if not thousands, of people I picked up. Only one went to the airport. One businessman went to the airport.
No way.
That was it. The rest was prostitutes, drug dealers, drunk people, people on meth. I mean, you name it. They were up to no good.
You had a good barrier behind you, right?
No. It
It was all open?
No, well, I mean, what is this, 1991, 92, whatever. There's no barrier. I didn't have AC. Nothing. These cars were junk.
Oh, man.
Old Ford Tauruses that didn't run. I think that was the most fun. Overall, my most fun job. Because I was always curious who was going to get in next. I mean, I pick up 20, 30, 40 people a night.
That's hopping.
And it'd always be a story. Well, you got to remember that first 20, 25, you're not making any money. You're just paying money back. Because it's just like any business, right? It's a business. It's a business for the evening. So you have car rental, which is, let's say it's $100, right? So the first 100 you make is just going back to the guy who gave you the car.
Right.
They get gas.
Then you got
let's call it $40 back then. Then you got food, whatever. You keep you going for 12 hours, 13, 14 hours straight. Right, so your expenses are a couple $100. So the first 200 you make, you made nothing. You still made nothing. So then you got to go right after that, because that's where your profit's coming.
And that's where you hope you get some good tips.
Yeah, you hope it. That doesn't usually happen. You got a lot of runners too. People jump out at the end and take off. A lot of people try to stab you. People put guns in your face.
Did you actually have somebody put a gun in your face?
Oh yeah, a few times.
Dang.
A few times. Some drunk guy tried to stab me with a needle.
Nice.
From the back. And so a bunch of kids tried to rob me after they got out of the car. They got out of the car and they got out of the car. I dropped them off. They came up to the driver's side and they stuck a knife in my face and said, give us all your money.
Fine, well-adjusted children.
Yeah. I just told them to look down because I'm not a gun fanatic, but you had to in this business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I had 9mm and it was always like under my leg, right? So I just had to point it at them. I could look down. They ran. Nice. I wasn't going to hurt them. They were just teenagers.
What was that movie with Tom Cruise where he was the hitman He was going around in the taxi cab with what's his name? I was picturing something like that happening to you.
It was brutal. I loved it though because you really didn't know what was going to happen next.
And that is part of, working. It's sometimes I think we lose that when we're, doing the grind, meetings back to back to back, phone calls,
Yeah, for sure.
spreadsheets, oh my God, project plans, deadlines. It's like you lose sight of that.
Yeah, I call it the B side of life, as you know.
The B side.
Well, the old records.
Oh, yeah.
They had the A and the B side.
The A was the
on
hit.
on the 45s.
Yeah.
The A was the head, the B side. So I call it the B side of life, meaning, particularly when you live in this a white collar world. We live in a bubble, right? We complain about the project plans and the this and that.
Unreasonable expectations.
Right, so on and so forth. But then there's a whole other world that's going on out there, and I'm not just talking about downtown Detroit. I'm talking about just
Anywhere.
anywhere. There's this whole other world going on out there, and until you have experienced, I think it's important for people to try to attempt to experience both sides of that. And I think that it's assisted me in formulating a much more holistic view on life in general.
It gives you some street smarts. It gives you
That was just a job.
right.
I mean, I had been in much more peculiar situations before that when I was younger that I won't really get into. But
Strike that from the record.
it wasn't bad stuff. It was just, let's call it peculiar.
Peculiar.
Right, peculiar situations on where you have to really know how to get out of them or how to handle them.
Well, it's new.
I
You're young.
I grew up in a day and age where when you got into fights, people didn't call the police. You just got into a fight and people left. That was it. Right?
Yeah.
So I got into a lot of fights when I was younger, and I'm not saying I started them, but that's just the way it was. When we grew up.
Oh, it's definitely changed now.
I
I
mean,
mean,
get into a fight on the bus or something like that. The police are involved. That's not the way it was back then.
you point your finger at somebody, you're up for an assault charge nowadays.
Yeah, right. So
It's
I
crazy.
dealt with all kinds of peculiar stuff. So driving the cab it was one of 3 jobs I was doing at the time. I'd work for the city during the day, landscaping the freeway.
Man, in
In
Arizona.
Arizona, doing. On top of that, I was doing tar work, in Arizona as well during the middle of the
Well,
summer.
you picked the winners out there.
There's really nothing. I remember walking through like an office one time. I was working at some metal factory, and it was such an annoying job because all they wanted to do was move this enormous chunk of sheet metal, like 10 feet.
All right,
That's it.
that's it.
It took like 4 weeks to do it. I'm like, why? He's like, I want that here, and I'm like, why don't you just get a forklift or something and push it? He's like, no, it has to be a sheet at a time. It took weeks to do it.
That is weird.
And I'd go inside and I'd see these younger people, probably about 24, 25 years old, wearing their little suits, and not their suits, but their, their ties and everything. I was always thinking, what do you guys do?
what is it you do
What do
around
you
here?
guys do here? Why do you get to be in the cool?
I want that job.
Why do we get to be in the cool air and I'm the guy moving metal? But driving cab was probably my favorite job of all time.
All right. What was your favorite project in IT?
Yeah, I know. I went a little off the skids there.
It's all right. Bring you back.
My favorite project. I always enjoyed whatever was the most, as you put it, challenging. I've done so many of them over the years that I don't find many of them to be very challenging. Meaning, I'm able to see the end result when I start.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's
that
just
comes with experience, right?
with experience. So it's just a matter of time, getting through the motions and the time, and going through it.
Cutting through the bureaucracy.
Yeah. So obviously for me, that started to become, I don't want to say boring, but not very fruitful to my mind because I had done it so many times, and always succeeded, never failed on a project, always under budget, always on time or before.
Yeah, I can't say that myself. I can say I finished all my projects now, whether I was under budget or not. Well, with enough change orders, everything's under budget.
Well,
so.
no, yeah, I'm talking without change orders. I was very. I don't know if you recall my style. I was just very. Let's get it done.
Absolutely.
This is happening, and this is the date, and that's the way it's going to be done.
And we're shooting for that date, hell or high water. That's what we're doing.
I would say the most fun were probably the earlier ones because I didn't know what I was doing.
So something new.
Yeah, things that were brand new to me. I want to say probably the Children's Health Insurance Program for Iowa was probably one of my most fun. It wasn't a project; it was a program. Essentially, I was working for EDS at the time, and this is in 1996, 97, and the Clinton administration had put out a mandate for all states to have what's called the Children's Health Insurance Program, which still exists today in every state, and they're all called something different. And I wrote the RFP response for it single-handedly, and everything from the technology to the process to the outreach to how we would do it and so on and so forth. And since it was brand new and nobody had done it before, it was kind of an open season. There was no template to work from.
New territory.
New territory entirely. So it was really an honor in a way to be able to formulate that. So I responded to it and we won. The funny thing is my bosses had no clue what we won. So I think I was 25 years old. I was pretty young.
How big was the contract?
About $30 million.
Well, that's a nice little chunk.
to do eligibility, basically stand up the state's program, do eligibility outreach, so on and so forth, call centers, you name it, the whole thing, the whole program. So I think I enjoyed that the most because I didn't know what I was doing and nobody else did either. Right, but it was a matter of really thinking through what would be appropriate for this type of program, and so we won. And my bosses didn't know what I had done. They were happy about it because it was revenue, but they didn't know what to do. So they sent me up to Iowa from Texas.
You landed it. You figure it out.
Yeah, that was basically it. I went there with a piece of luggage and what felt like a $30 million check, piece of luggage, and a lot of shitty weather in Des Moines in the middle of the winter.
Oh, couldn't have even been the summer.
No office, no people, no nothing. Nothing. No network. No, there's nothing. It's just me and a piece of luggage. I remember meeting, I think she still works there actually, at Health and Human Services in Iowa. And we had to do everything from name it to build the website to, just everything had to be done. Talk about building a business from the ground up.
That definitely sounds challenging.
So we ended up calling it Hawkeye because the Iowa's Hawkeye. So it's healthy and well kids in Iowa.
Nice.
And I built their website for them and got everything going. I remember her meeting me, and I can't recall her name, but we met for the first time in a parking lot, and I was 25 years old, and I looked young. I looked younger. I probably looked about 22. And she says, "Are you Richard or whatever?" And I said, "Yeah." He kind of got this. She didn't give me a look, but like, "Oh my Lord, what do we do? We just gave this kid this contract."
Well, he knew how to fill out the form, so at least he knows how to write.
I told her I had written the RFP response, and I think she started to feel slightly more comfortable over time. I proved myself pretty quickly, as we went through various committees and discussions with senators and so on and so forth. I proved my worth pretty quickly about the knowledge of the program, my knowledge of technology. So that was probably the most fun one because it really was no template. Just it was kind of like coming to me and saying, "Listen, build a rocket ship."
There you go.
I figure it out.
Right. So that's really translated for you. Now you've got how many companies? 4 or 5?
Oh, 4 officially.
4 officially.
And if you don't count Informaticis, which is I let go.
Okay. So you are CEO of 4 different companies right now.
Well, I mean, so you're talking about quantum is certainly the most active.
Yeah, that's your core business.
sort of our
and
core-
what does
core
quantum do?
Quantum is, business and technology consulting straight across the board.
No data centers, not to be confused with the data center company, because there is a quantum that's spelled differently.
Yeah, well, that's why we spelled it with an A.
Yeah.
So, no, business and technology consulting. I'd hate to. I'm not going to name names of companies, but basically a boutique Big Four, if you will. Right. So, and we're able to challenge them pretty well because we have the same capabilities in many capacities that they do, minus the margin.
With better price.
Well, they have large capital needs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Investment needs. So
You're feeding a monster when you go with those guys.
Yeah, you are. And it's not to say that they're bad companies. It's
No.
just that, in many cases, we've been called by those companies to fill in for them, if you will.
That's good.
To fill their projects, because the reality is when you're dealing with a brand, when you're dealing with the Big Four, the Big Six, right? And you feel comfortable with that brand because they've been around for X amount of time.
Well, they can't do all the work either, right?
No, they can't. So what they do is they outsource it and or partner up with companies like ours, to do the work actually. So, but we've been able to challenge them on a number of different fronts, including winning contracts recently in states right alongside them as pre-qualification vendors.
And what was your next company that you got into, and how did that? So Quantum was your core company, and then you've gotten these other startups going.
Well, I mean, we did Van Staten and Associates, which still exists, and essentially that is a company that provides the core of that company provides representation for other companies. So believe it or not, and I can't name names of companies, but think of the big companies in the technology industry. They'll actually come to Van Staten and Associates and say, "Can you represent our company in this area?" So, say for example, XYZ multi-billion-dollar company will say, "We don't really know how to penetrate the market in this area. We don't know how to approach it. We don't know how to sell it. We don't know if our product is feasible. We don't know the people. We don't have the relationships. We don't understand procurement. And the cycle is too long, particularly in the government. Can you basically they want their sales cycle shortened by about 2 years.
Oh, like every project I've ever done.
2, 3, right. They want their sales cycle shortened by about 2-3 years. So they'll come to us and say, "Can we not only pick your brain about strategies, but the insights to how this organization operates?" It's not just about introducing them to the right people. It's
about fast tracking.
About fast tracking them with a full strategy about how to go about business with this particular organization, and making sure that the product and or services that they have are even feasible, sellable.
Right.
Meaning, if we don't think that they are, we don't represent that organization for that particular product line.
You can't do it, right?
Well, we say no, because at the end of the day, because we're gonna end up failing,
right?
For them, their expectations are going to be very high, because they're paying a particular fee,
right?
And if we don't think we can deliver on that, we just say no.
Gotcha. So then there was the other company, which I just think has the coolest name, Sugar Skull Software.
Sugar Skull Software.
I just love that name. I don't know why.
Everybody loves that name. Yeah. Sugar Skulls are actually, you could probably explain better than I could. So, you don't want to say anything today?
No, I can't. I don't.
You don't. Sugar Skulls are a Mexican tradition. I have nothing to do with Mexican traditions, but Sugar Skulls, you ever seen what they are?
Yeah, actually, yes. It's part of the Day of the Dead kind of thing.
Thing in Mexico. And so anyway, it's custom software development, essentially is what it is. So on primarily either AWS or Azure environments.
Okay, so you're focused on the cloud with those development pieces.
Yeah, so we'll develop in either Java or .NET on those platforms, primarily for government entities, custom software. Look, so you got to think of it this way. You can build. There's a few routes that you can take when you're doing custom software, right? And one is to buy, say, for example, a COTS product.
And for people that don't get that, COTS.
Off-the-shelf software, or in this particular case, a subscription-based software like Salesforce, for example, is probably a perfect example, and one that people would understand. But the problem with Salesforce, it's a great product, but it was never intended for what it's being used for.
A lot of these applications aren't intended. They can't run in the cloud.
They were originally
not that one.
Originally, say for example, they're doing this. A lot of organizations are doing the same exact thing that they did with the predecessor softwares. For example, if you were to use Oracle Fusion or Siebel, which were client server, and Siebel was client server, Remedy was client server at the time. Basically, they would use them. Even prior to that was Vantive back in the mid '90s. They'd use what was customer relationship management software or ERP software, PeopleSoft, for example, as platforms, off-the-shelf platforms, in order to build something else.
And then build around it to
kind of use it for its database, its architecture, its integration capabilities, and so on and so forth. Right? It's built-in APIs. Right? So they'd use it for that, but the problem with doing that is that you essentially bastardize the system. Everybody who's going to listen to this would understand who's done it. And it's almost near impossible to either get off of it. SAP was a big one too.
Oh yeah,
where you use these COTS products and you pay millions of dollars for it, and
for millions of dollars to get it in place.
Well, okay, so let's go trifold, right? You spend millions for the software licensing. And this is just even in the client server environment, right? Then you spend millions to implement it, and then you spend millions to maintenance and support, So, Salesforce is a more updated version of that. So it's in the cloud, and the model is different because it's subscription based. So you pay whatever, $19.99 up to $199 per seat. The difference being you don't have to deal with the back end in two different ways, the majority of two ways. One is you don't have to handle the infrastructure. Right. So you don't have to have your own on-site equipment to deal with, which is a big problem for people. And secondly, you have to deal with patches. They deal with all that. Right. Patches and fixes. Which
but once you get on it, you can't get off of it easily.
The problem with it is that...
It's kind of like crack.
I guess so. Yeah,
software dealers are
it's
crack
like cigarettes and crack. Once you're on it, it's tough to get off.
It is. Because your business becomes dependent on it.
Well, you're building it in a platform that is somebody else's platform, right? And particularly 5 to 7 years ago, Salesforce wasn't what it is today.
No,
Salesforce
exponential growth
stands for what it was originally intended for. It was a product for Salesforce automation, SFA, which was a component of the CRM suite of products. Now you had call center, you had marketing, campaign management, and Salesforce automation, right? And channel management. That's essentially what that was for. So Salesforce was originally a niche product exclusively for Salesforce automation, which was competing against companies like Onyx. People decided that particularly when they went to the cloud, that they would use it for just basically anything. Right. So to build medical marijuana systems out of it, to build ERP system out of it, you build anything out of it. So they're using its core structure, its database, its whatever, right? And you can go online and do whatever. It used to have a lot of limitations in what you could do, but not so much anymore. But the problem is that that's not what it's intended for. Nor is, Zoho is another example that as a platform that you can use. Nonetheless, Sugar Skull software build. We do that.
Salesforce, PeopleSoft. You do all the.
Well, we don't
different
do
platforms.
PeopleSoft because it's gone.
That's
part.
true.
That's part of Oracle now. But no, I more the preference in custom software straight out of the gate. I.e., just build it on .NET or Java, Angular.
There's a lot of challenges moving that stuff to the cloud, and we could probably dig into here in a little bit.
Yeah. So basically, we most of it's going to be on an AWS environment because that's the most flexible.
Right. There's some neat things coming up from Azure that I've been reading about, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole quite yet.
Oh, they're catching up. They're catching up. Microsoft is finally. We talked about this a few episodes back with somebody else.
Yeah.
That since Nadella took over from the knucklehead,
Right.
they're doing a lot better. But
Right.
so that's what that company does.
All right. I think I'd like to take a break.
Let's take a break.
All right. We'll pick that back up.
He's the boss today.
All right. I think we're getting there.
Cab driving.
Yeah, you
that?
just had to throw that in.